I'm sorry, did you think it was going to be a slow offseason in terms of news for the Georgia football team?
I didn't.
Did you think that we were just going to tiptoe right through the end of February without much upheaval on the Georgia coaching staff? Not one, but two coaches Kirby Smart's having to replace. And we got info on both of them coming up today on the Locked On Bulldogs podcast.
You are Locked On Bulldogs, your daily podcast on the Georgia Bulldogs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Locked On Bulldogs, we're Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making us your first listen. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel, make every moment more on them in a second. He is Daniel. I am Clint. This is Locked On Bulldogs, and we talk about the Bulldogs every single day. We love them.
Guilty.
Dogs. It is true. And when we talk about saying things about the Bulldogs every day, it's most every hour. We should probably be true. It just so happens that we record this.
We record some of it.
But we're talking in text threads most of the day. Don't
That's
tell
right.
our employers. It's funny, this is public and now they know.
They don't listen.
Don't.
They're not part of the 199. Thank
They
you,
don't
Lord.
know. The
They're not part of
199, the loyal third segment listeners, hang on, because today we are talking about coaching carousel that is happening in the SEC, specifically with Georgia in the offseason, where Kirby Smart is going to go to replace said amazing coaches that we are thrilled and happy get the opportunity to go elsewhere and do their business. We're going to give you the names, talk about implications and what it means for Georgia. And Daniel, let's start with now before on this podcast, we're talking about wide receiver loss and
Brian
saying
McClendon.
to us, Brian McClendon, it two things can be true. Incredible recruiter. Developer. People got
yes,
mad.
there it is.
See, they got mad. They thought that we needed a better recruiter. So they thought, oh, it's good. He's gone. But we've talked about easy. Don't always be happy with what you want. And turns out, Jimmy C's name comes popping up and Dog Nation got feels about that.
Oh, there's a lot of feelings.
Because what happened is we inverted it. Development went with Brian McClendon.
Question.
And now comes in recruiting. That's what Jimmy C can do. We're going to talk about that. But not only that, we were hit second gut punch. Dell Mcgee, it is official. He is down, getting a head coaching gig, which, by the way, we told you on Twitter, your job is to say, go be great, coach. And we hope he is great.
He will be great. This is
That's
long overdue for Dell Mcgee.
Long overdue.
It is. It truly is long overdue. And so we've got thoughts and feelings on both of these. Which one of these coaches do you want to start with, though, Clay?
I want to start because I now have to bring back my foil tin hat.
I think the listenership on audio, let the record show. The viewers on Twitter will tell you we are all disappointed because I thought if there was ever going to be an episode that Clint was going to show up in the tinfoil hat, it was going to be today. Jimmy C is bringing back the secret playbook to Athens. Listen, let's make no bones about this. He was not beloved during his time in Athens.
We were thrilled to see him go from the
That's
offensive
accurate.
coordinator
That's
position at UGA. Thrilled.
That's right. It was not a good run. It was not a good season for the Georgia offense. At one point, I mean, you remember this whole saga? At one point, he's interacting with a fan on Twitter, asking for advice that seemed like it was like, oh, you think you could do it better? What would you do in that situation? And yet it came across a little bit like, no, genuinely, I want to know.
Honestly asking.
I honestly want to know what you would do in that situation. James Coley, let the record show. Yeah. We love this hire. And we did not love James Coley as the offensive coordinator at Georgia. So two things can be true. Two things can be true at the same time. James Coley's not the offensive coordinator at Georgia. James Coley's not calling the plays. James Coley is not leading the offense. He's not tasked with being a field general.
No.
What does a position coach do in football, Clint? Help the people understand some of the key roles and responsibilities that James Coley will be in charge of here.
It's really, really unique because designing plays, calling plays, understanding the flow of the game, talking to Kirby Smart, even. These are not at all. Kirby Smart will say, you have these 12 young men. Take them, go off to the side, find drills and skills.
Make them better.
Make them better in footwork, in catching balls, warming them up, stretching them. And then when it comes time for 7-on-7, guess what? Your job is to watch them and see if they did what Mike Bobo has requested of them to do. And if they don't, you say, guess what? You didn't do what Mike, my boss, is telling me you should do. There's no skip level management. There's no talk. His job is to ensure footwork, ball skills are there to improve that for the season. And then the majority of his job, I would like to take all dry erase markers out of Jimmy C's office. He don't need them. He don't need a whiteboard.
Well,
he don't need none of that.
It just won't be unless he's reiterating what Mike Bobo has already said. Then, in which
Mike
case,
Bobo is holding his hand and writing on the whiteboard himself,
like a ghost making pottery type situation, where Mike Bobo comes in from behind and
Demi Moore doesn't. And then his secondary job, is to be on airplanes. And actually, his primary job is to be on airplanes and helicopters and cars going down to South Florida and talking to every single 5-star wide receiver in the state and telling them why University of Georgia is where they need to be. Those are his two jobs.
That's right. And so the development piece is a question. And we told you that last week. We said losing Brian McClendon, y'all were all griping and moaning about how we can't recruit these elite wide receivers. Guess what? Okay. Brian McClendon made elite wide receivers out of the 3- and 4-star guys that he was given. You were never going to replace him with a guy that was as proven of a developer. Now, it remains to be seen. James Coley developing wide receivers. He's obviously an experienced wide receiver coach. I mean, he's got a lot of experience. He was the wide receivers coach at South Carolina for 43 days, most recently, before Kirby Smart called, and he was like, oh, thank God. Yes. Can I get out of Columbia, South Carolina? Yes. Anytime. I'll take any amount of money. It's tough to be an assistant on another team when Kirby Smart comes calling, by the way. Like, it's when you're Shane Beamer and you catch wind that somebody on your staff has been contacted by Kirby Smart, you just immediately go on Indeed or you go on LinkedIn jobs, and you just start finding another.
You're at that neighbor's quinceañera. You immediately leave. You stop.
That's right.
You get in the car, and
you just start networking at the quinceañera. You're like, tell me about Pops. Can he? Does he know? What does he know about a route tree? What does he know about? We like the James Coley hire, and it primarily hinges around what he does best. We'll talk about that and a lot more, including Dell Mcgee and what we're hearing about a new running backs coach at the University of Georgia. All that coming up next.
But first, I want to let you know about FanDuel. FanDuel is fantastic. Daniel and I love them.
We do.
Official sports book of Locked On Bulldogs. Get buckets with their first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, because right now new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams, quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn. Shoot your shot. FanDuel is the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. All right, so Jimmy C's biggest talent is acquisition. It's Jimmy and Joe's, not X's and O's.
He's in mergers and acquisitions. He is merging talent with the University of Georgia roster.
He does not export. His job is to
He's an importer.
He's an importer. He brings into the tariff-filled
The Kentucky
land.
Quarterback doesn't export either, we learned.
He learned.
He's not big on the exporting. Jimmy C's, he's in talent acquisition. He's an elite recruiter. And let me remind you, Georgia fans, who always have a negative word to say about anything, no matter what the situation is,
sure,
without fail.
Sure.
When Jimmy C left Athens, And we were all nobody was like, oh man, we lost a heck of an offensive coordinator. But when Jimmy C left Athens and we hired Todd Monken, who may be the greatest offensive coordinator that the University of Georgia has ever had.
He is the greatest offensive coordinator Georgia's ever had.
All of you Georgia fans got all up in our mentions and said, Todd Monken's never going to be able to recruit the way that James Coley can. He's never going to be able to bring in the talent. Look at what we're missing out on. We wouldn't hire this has-been hack old man from the NFL. He's never going to be, at least with James Coley, we had a roster filled with talent. Well, what have I told you now that thing that you said you were going to miss about James Coley, he is bringing to the table, and he's not going to have to do any of the things that you were mad at him about. This is what makes this hire truly a home run hire. You mentioned South Florida. He is the best recruiter of Florida and South Florida specifically. You could maybe argue that Mario Cristobal is on the level with James Coley in terms of recruiting South Florida. Obviously, Mario Cristobal's deep ties to Miami and the head coach at Miami. But James Coley is going to be in the conversation for not just wide receivers, y'all, but every elite prospect coming out of South Florida, bar none. I'm talking about offensive players, defensive players. James Coley's going to be opening those doors for Kirby Smart and the University of Georgia. And that is a significant win for the Georgia football team because a big area of need has been elite talent at the wide receiver position for Georgia. We talked about wide receiver recruiting last week. We're not going to go back into all that, but James Coley gives Georgia as much of a competitive advantage as you could ever possibly want in that area.
I mean, y'all, just really quick, who he's been in on. Tyson Campbell, y'all remember him and what he was able to do?
Oh, he played... He was offensive because James Coley was the offensive coordinator, and so he recruited offensive players, right? So Tyson Campbell. Oh,
Fort Lauderdale, Florida, defensive back, pretty dang good one. What about Isaiah Wilson? Y'all remember that?
Oh, I remember Isaiah Wilson. Yep,
big tall glass of water. What about probably the most talented? Now, hear me when I say raw talent wide receiver Georgia's ever had. In George Pickens, was he a he was one of those 5-star guys.
We like the 5-star guys.
Don Blaylock, Tyreek Stevenson, James Cook. I mean, these are the names in which he's on. Kyrus Jackson, Jermaine Holloman. This is who he gets. He locks down top tier talent. And we think this is a home run hire. We're asking him to be position coach.
Yep.
We're not asking him to be too big for his britches. Sit down there, hang out, make the guys feel good, go recruit. And watch Mike Bobo cook. This is fantastic. Okay, but that's not
what else is going to be fantastic is Dell Mcgee at Georgia State. Now, this was always going to be the path for Dell Mcgee. I don't think a high major program was ever going to come calling for Dell Mcgee. And I think it's been made totally clear he has reached his ceiling at the University of Georgia, right? He's never getting promoted to offensive coordinator. They've had many opportunities to do that. They've never chosen to do so. They're clearly not ever going to do that. The next move for him was always going to be a lower tier offensive, like a lower tier head coaching position. Sorry.
And we're not throwing shade at him right now by calling.
No, that's just always what it was going to be. He wants to be a head coach. He's made that perfectly clear. This was always going to be the move. But Clint, to put him at a Georgia school is just got to be the gravy on the biscuit for Dell Mcgee, because that is now all of a sudden he's not going to have to work hard at all in order to build a roster of players that are far and away more talented than Georgia State deserves. And Georgia State is a program that you can have some football success at. It's a program that has proven can get things done, and it's not going to take long, I don't think, before he's going to be able to prove himself at Georgia State. And then you're going to see schools start to notice and come calling for Dell Mcgee on the Power 5 major college football level. And so, so thrilled for him. It's obviously a loss for Georgia. We at one time on this podcast, this was years ago, we at one time said that Dell Mcgee was the number one Georgia staff person that we would not want to lose. Now, I think if we were to do those rankings last week, I don't know that Dell Mcgee would come in at number one.
He'd be in the top 3.
It's still a significant loss for the University of Georgia. His presence, you want to talk about, you just listed players that James Coley was in on. You want to talk about the rooms that this man, Dell Mcgee, has been a part of. I don't have to tell you the names because you already know the names, and they are legendary.
They're not names. They're plays in which you felt the joy of yelling at the top of your lungs for joy as they streaked to touchdown after touchdown after touchdown down the sideline.
You could argue that the best cohesive, 7-year run of running backs that Georgia has ever produced. Now, I know they've had great backs.
Sure.
But you want to just do a cohesive run of backs, and I don't know that you're going to find Dell Mcgee, the way that the players feel about him, the way that you've seen him interact on the sidelines, the way that he coaches in practice. It's a big loss for Kirby Smart, for you, and for for all of the Georgia fan base. But our loss is Dell Mcgee's gain, and so again, kudos to him for sticking it out, for serving so well at the University of Georgia, and wishing him nothing but success. He is now the coach of the second best program in the state of Georgia. And
no, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. That's incorrect, Daniel. That's not true.
Is it? Because I said the second best program in the state of Georgia, and you're going to argue me by saying, "Oh no, I'm right." Yeah, no, that's right.
Okay,
no, I'm right. Speaking of the third best, speaking of the third best program in the state of Georgia, we maybe have some information. You probably have seen it by this point. Have some information on who's going to be replacing Dell Mcgee, and it is interesting to say the least. We'll talk about it right after this. All right, Clint.
Yep, here we go.
It's
$1.99 is here.
The $1.99 is.
Get your favorite beverage.
You love
Get ready
to see
for.
That.
You love to see the banter.
People love this banter. I'll tell you what else they love. They love quick and efficient hires. Before we get to talking about Josh Crawford and who this guy is and what it means for Georgia and what his pedigree and what his resume is, can we just start right here?
Shall we?
Does it start to feel like that this man, Kirby Smart, you know who I'm talking about when I say Kirby Smart? This man, Kirby Smart.
The current best college football head coach in the entire land.
Indisputable.
Not even
that you
close.
Just made.
No one fights that.
You couldn't even find a Fox broadcaster who would argue with you on that. That's how. That's what. Oh, thank you for backing up 9 feet from your microphone before you did that.
Well, when you do the Gus Johnson voice, you gotta get a mile away from.
Someone tell him that, please. Someone tell him to get a mile away from the microphone. Before we get into who Josh Crawford is and all the pedigree, does it start to feel like this man, Kirby Smart, has just got a list of guys in his back pocket that he says, I'm going to lose all these cats on my staff. Like, he knows T-Rob, he ain't going to be on the staff forever. He's going to get other opportunities. He's going to go make a name for himself. Glenn Schumann, he ain't going to be on the staff forever. He's going to go make a name for himself.
Glenn is gone after next year, y'all. Just prepare yourself.
He knows these things. Does it feel like he's just got a list of names that he just says, all right, well, that's a tough one. I guess I'll just move on to the next guy.
It feels like Ocean's 11. It feels like Danny Ocean just knows. Like in his, he just has all these feelers out there. He's like, what's so-and-so doing? And within a drop of a hat, he's like, well, he's doing this. I know he's doing this. I just talked to his brother's sister's girlfriend's uncle, and I know this, and I'm just waiting to bring him into a spot and put them perfectly positioned to excel at what they do best. Daniel, he absolutely has a list, and it's continuing to grow. When he goes on high school campuses, by the way, high school football coaches, because we're going to talk about here in a second, our man Crawford, and we're going to talk about high school pedigree that he comes from. If Kirby Smart asks you your name,
you better be ready to deliver on the goods. This is a job interview. You understand what I'm saying? That's a job interview.
Because again, the college ranks are a quick the transfer portal is not just for players, it's for college ranks as well, for college coaches as well. So let's talk about Crawford.
So Josh Crawford, most recently the wide receiver coach at Georgia Tech, under Brent Key. But before that, Clint, you mentioned the pedigree. Talk about the high school coaching. Talk about where this guy's been. Who is this guy? Give us a little bit of a nutshell on Josh Crawford.
11 seasons on the circuit of the state of Georgia high school football coaching. And not just coaching, but coaching at elite levels and elite players.
Yeah. He done been out there is what you're trying to say.
He'd been out there winning championships at some of the most competitive high school football there is, doing very, very well. And not only that, dude is savage when it comes to developing players to go off and get looked at, not just raw talent, but getting players looked at. And then, yes, I understand Georgia Tech, whatever. Like, it was a step up. It was a stepping stone. Always was a stepping stone. Don't knock him for being at Georgia Tech, because he came from the high school ranks in which he was prolific, coaching these young men that are now in college. Went over to Georgia Tech, did his time, and now Kirby Smart put his name in his hat when he was recruiting all these places. When Kirby was on the circuit, he put his name, Crawford's name, in a little black book somewhere. And he was at Western Kentucky for that. And you want to talk about Western Kentucky? I know y'all talk about Hilltoppers and don't know what they do, but let me give you a little snapshot of what they do. They don't care about defense.
No, what do they care about, Clint?
They care about this. While he was 2 seasons, Daniel, 2 seasons.
That seems like less than several.
Yeah. Over 10,000 receiving yards is 94 touchdowns for wide receivers in 2 years, Daniel.
And Kirby Smart said, we're trying to get in that South Florida pipeline. I'm sorry, but we done filled the wide receiver opening.
That's okay.
But we do have, I know you're coaching wide receivers now. That's kind of your thing. That's kind of your knit. That's sort of where your bread is buttered. We do have an opening in the backfield, though, with the running backs. Would you want to leave your current position and come over again? If you're Brent Key and you hear that one of your coaches has been contacted by Kirby Smart, what are you going to do? Like, there's nothing you're going to do. You're going to go out and look for a coach to replace him, because he gone.
He is gone.
He jumped ship, comes over to Georgia as a running back coach. Let me tell you, just not knowing a ton about Josh Crawford, let me tell you what 11 years of elite high school football coaching tells me.
Please do.
Number one, you do not win for 11 years of coaching at high level Georgia high school football unless you are an elite developer of football players.
There it is.
That is how you win on the high school level. You understand? Like, you take the guys you have and you make them significantly better. You develop talent in bunches. So that's one thing that I've learned about Josh Crawford just from that alone. Do you know what else I learned from 11 years in the trenches of Georgia elite high school football? You mentioned Kirby Smart got a Rolodex of names of people. Do you think Josh Crawford knows anybody in the state of Georgia? We done got South Florida down there covered. Do you think this man knows anybody? Do you think he's going to be able to pick up the phone and say, hey, coach, I'm looking at this kid. Talk to me give me the real deal on this kid. That's
the difference between knowing the people at the high schools that he has friends with and kept friends with at each stop, as opposed to needing to go to the front office to sign in to get the tour of the facility
Now,
instead of
listen,
just
we're not
parking.
necessarily talking about Kalen DeBoer and the Alabama Crimson Tide coaching staff, but we are.
I am.
But we
I am.
are because Kirby is taking a different tactic. Instead of hiring people from Sioux Falls and the Pacific Northwest, he's chosen to hire people who are geographically connected to the regions he actually wants to recruit in and win at.
When I tell you that Kalen DeBoer knows more about the different salts and when to use them on different paths during winter rather than the highways that connect Georgia high schools,
Yeah.
I'm not exaggerating.
No, he don't know nothing about Spaghetti Junction, but he knows everything about how to de-ice that sidewalk outside of his.
He gonna do it. He gonna get out there in November with all the supplies and be like,
"Oh, it's Tuscaloosa. It doesn't really do.
Oh, it doesn't do
down
it here. Oh, okay." But
Josh
Kirby has
Crawford.
done opposite.
Josh Crawford is a monster hire. It's a because this guy's connected. He can obviously develop. He can obviously coach. He's also going to be connected on the recruiting front. And now, by the way, he's got that power G on his chest, Clint. And there ain't nothing that recruits like that power G. And oh, by the way, the guy coming over his right shoulder off the top rope to seal the deal, that's Kirby Smart, who's the best in the game. So
see, that's what's so wild. This is like Captain America. Like, you take a dude who just the heart of gold, the character gold, the morale, and then you super inject him with the power G, and it's like, holy geez, now you're screwed. Like, he was a good dude before. He was going to stand up, but he didn't have the power. Now he's got y'all done messed up.
It is it's just fascinating to me how fast this stuff goes down. And it speaks to Kirby Smart, I think.
It really does. He's got a Rolodex, and it's fantastic. This has been Locked On Bulldogs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Daniel will be back. We're going to be talking about what implications this means for wide receivers and all y'all that want the 5 stars. We're going to be talking about it. We'll see you guys later.
See ya.